Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be going through more of the things that you guys have submitted to the submit a topic or topic request form, so I can catch up on what you guys would like to be talked about. So we're going to go through some of those. If anybody watching now has anything they would like me to talk about, to cover, to attempt to cover, if it is a request for a book review, I'll put it on a list, and we'll get to a couple of those that are submitted in there. But if you want me to read a certain book, you can submit it to there, but I can't promise like when or where it'll happen because I have a lot of books to catch up on right now. But they are going on a list when they're recommended. I clearly have too much going on and I read too slow. So we're going to go through those. If there's anything that you want to ask me specifically or a topic that comes up that you see that you want my opinion on, feel free to submit it there. It can be on anything, generally speaking. I'm going to regret saying that. So, answering is at my discretion in general, but also if anything is about a craft or if anything is about a just know that anything that I say for any of these is all personal opinion. There, if it's about craft or writing or art in general, those are all going to be individualistic things, and I can only give you like my thoughts or my recommendations or the way that I do things, which isn't necessarily applicable to everybody. There's going to be different opinions on pretty much everything, and so all I can give you is what I think, but there is no one way to do anything, generally speaking. So just keep that in mind. Nothing I say is going to be a rule. It's a personal preference, approach, what have you. But before we get into your guys' submissions, number one, if you would like what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemoi, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creativity because y'all come in swinging. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, including comic books. You can submit the first chapter and the cover. It'll be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. Monday videos are always community based, specifically trying to share what people are doing the best way that I can at the moment. Maybe someday I'll figure out other ways to share, but that's the best that I can think of right now. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. My newest novel, Bodymore Zero, is coming out in October, and the ARC will be available probably within the next month if you want a sneak peek or an early copy of it. With that said, let's jump into the topics of the day that you guys have submitted for opinion. The first one is Writers Beware on Facebook had this article. Thought you'd be interested. Why Silicon Valley's biggest AI developers are hiring poets. Training data companies are grabbing writers of fiction, drama, poetry, and also general humanity experts to improve AI creative writing. I feel like you're not really going to get that far with that sort of thing because especially like poetry or specific types of prose are not straightforward. You have to have nuance and understanding of what things mean in context. And personally, at this point, I've still not seen the systems able to disseminate what information means or what stuff means. It kind of just guesses and throws stuff together. Silicon Valley's biggest generative artificial intelligence developers are looking for a new kind of data worker poets. Oh, by the way, this was posted September of 2023, so this was a year ago. So think of this being what they were projecting or what they were saying was fresh a year ago, and then where we are now. A string of job postings from high-profile training data companies such as Scale AI and Appen, I've never heard of those, are recruiting poets, novelists, playwrights, and writers with PhDs or master's degrees. Dozens more seek general annotators with humanities degrees or years of work experience in literary fields. The listings aren't limited to English. Some are looking specifically for poets of fiction written in Hindi and Japanese, as well as writers in languages less represented on the internet. Interesting choice. The companies say contractors will write short stories on a given topic to feed into the AI models. They will also use the workers to provide feedback on the literary quality of their current AI generative text. The listings illustrate the often obscured connection between generative AI's impressive capabilities and the invisible annotation work that powers them. When ChatGPT launched in November of 2022, observers were particularly impressed by its ability to write poems in English. Now, annotator firms are collecting creative writing data samples that could extend those powers into other languages. It is a sign that AI developers have flagged fluency in poetic forms as a priority while refining their generative writing products. The investment could have dividends for AI firms, according to Dan Brown, a professor at the University of Waterloo who researches computational creativity. Quote, if you can properly generate tabloid headlines in French, that's one thing. But if a product can replicate Victor Hugo's style or somebody famous, that gets a different kind of credibility, he told Rest of the World. Replicating classical language forms is a way of looking prestigious. Scale AI and Appen's client rosters include some of the biggest names in AI development, including OpenAI, Meta, Google, and Microsoft. There are companies that are trying to take the lead in an increasingly competitive generative AI race. Isn't it kind of weird that, like, the same person, the same company is feeding the other four companies the generative AI models that, like, they're all using, but they're competing against each other using the same models? Quote, the first company advantage in this space is incredibly big, Brown said. There are countries and languages for which companies are failing, and somebody can come in and snap those spaces up. It's an opportunity for them to wrap up the market before any new players can come in. So it's about locking people out and getting a monopoly on new markets, theoretically, which I don't think it's playing out that well for them right now, but whatever. And this, I can be in a bubble. It may be that I'm in a bubble. And it's, in a statement to Rest of the World, an Appen spokesman said the demand for writing contractors has increased significantly since the end of 2022. You think, how many of those you think are students that don't want to write their term papers, including in languages other than English? When hiring, quote, when hiring it for contributor roles like this one, we identify the type of skills required to develop high quality training data for a particular use case and client, the spokesman said. In this case, creative writers have a unique expertise that enables us to develop high quality training data for creative AI generatives like poetry, song lyrics, and narrative writing. I think that's just, again, laundering information, because you have people coming in, throwing stuff in, whatever, selling their stuff, which is going to then be copied onto other stuff. But I still need these companies to say, what is this offering anything? Because usually when you look at technological advances, you think of the benefit that it adds to life and to society. Like if you have an automobile, you don't have to feed the horses. You don't have to care for the horses with medical attention that is very expensive. You don't have to clean the poop off the streets. The car never gets exhausted. So it made that specific job of the horses no longer limiting. But it didn't stop what people are doing. What exactly is this adding? I don't really see anything. There are plenty of people that are creatives, that are artists, that are looking for work that you can hire, which we also know that they're not even doing, because often they're just redoing the same movies over and over and over again in the theaters. They're keeping stuff within the family, if you know what I mean. A spokesman for Scale AI declined to answer any specific questions about their recruitment efforts for competitive reasons. Quote, our work has and always will include humans in its loop, as it's critical for developing responsible, safe, and accurate AI, they wrote in a statement to the Rest of the World. Training an AI tool to generate high quality literary writing like poetry is no small challenge. Many large language models are not trained to be creative, and I don't think that they can at all, because they don't understand the process of what stuff goes together. And I've seen this too in conversations with AI bros that don't understand how creativity works either. They just think it's literally a generator that just throws out stuff from a limited pool. But that's not how creativity works at all. Actually, you talk to any of the AI pros and they really have no concept of where ideas come from, or how thoughts happen, or how creativity evolves. They see it as a product that is just produced like anything else. One of the criteria used by AI researchers to judge creativity is novelty, how different the writing generated by the model is from what already exists in the world. But tools like ChatGPT were built to mimic human writing, not to innovate. That's what they all do. They can't innovate. It's like, I used to work in automation. Guys, a little known fact maybe, I used to work in taking text that came from like government documents or bank statements or stuff like that. And I was a program writer to strip the text off of those documents, the PDFs that we receive from our clients, and then to reformat that stuff automatically based on the criteria for low visibility or for blind clients, period. So they would go into large print, braille, audio, and then data, because sometimes they would just go into data formatting. Usually government documents went into data. And we couldn't program the system, the automation, for things that it had never seen. So we would get large samples of documents from these different clients for these different forms, and then we would program the automation to look for these different variations of stuff, to then put it into the form in which it needed to be for printing. But if a document came in that had a variation that we'd never seen before, the automation couldn't catch it because it could only adjust for what we'd already told it to see. It's not innovative. It's not intuitive. It can only go through the loops, the do loops and the skips and the whatever that we tell it to, because we have identified the logic in which it is following. Quote, they are trained to reproduce. They are not designed to be great. They try to be close as possible to what exists. Fabricio Goes, who teaches informatics at the University of Leicester, told Rest of the World, explaining a popular stance among AI researchers. So, by design, many people argue that these systems are not creative. There are reasons many of the first regularly published stories written by AI were football recaps and financial news reports. Those are types of writings that often follow easily replicable formats and rarely require originality. Poetry, meanwhile, is often judged by its ability to weave imagery in surprising ways or conjure a certain mood. And what you're doing in poetry and in storytelling in general is you're sharing an experience, you're sharing an emotion, not the product type. Okay, we've got the art that is actually writing, that is trying to communicate an experience and an emotion to people, to show people something that they haven't seen before or haven't experienced before. And there is logic in writing, as well as the mood that is generated by the word choices that creates the atmosphere, whether it is a scary or an easy atmosphere or a nice atmosphere or a tense atmosphere. These things don't understand that, and your word choices do matter. It's the same thing when you're looking at visual arts. And an artist has to pick how a pose is going. If they can do that hand, are they going to do a solve for that hand? What outfit are they going to put the character in? And all of these choices express something specific about the character. The shape of the face, the shape of the nose, the shape of the eyes, the shape of the mouth, the shape of the anatomy in general. Is it a slim body or a thick body? Are they tall or short? How are they touching each other? If there are multiple people in the image, how are they interacting? And all of these are choices that the artist makes in order to express something specific, which is either character and or location and story. And if you're not actively making those decisions and understand why you're making those decisions, then you're not communicating anything. And these programs aren't doing that. They don't understand this stuff. They just recognize patterns and then attempt to duplicate the patterns, in the same way that when I was working in automation design to strip text out of documents, it was looking for a pattern so that it could replicate the pattern. When human beings write poetry, it is very, very difficult for human beings to do it well, said Brown, noting that most poets go through rounds of editing and revision that LLMs are not trained to do. Even now, after this LLM revolution has started, these machines are not machines for novelty. ChatGPT, for example, even struggles to imitate the structure and rhythm of well-established poets in English, especially when the poets are famous for breaking literary norms. That's another thing, is you're teaching it a pattern because it's learning a pattern and it works through a pattern. It works through an algorithm. Again, it's the do loops. It's the if not, then blank. And so it's going to constantly make those things. However, if you are an artist, if you're a human, not even an artist, if you're a human, you can see the rules and you can say, no thanks. And that's something that the programs cannot do. A human at any point in time can have the cognitive ability to say, no, I'm going to do something else. And people do it a lot. You also, when you're doing poems or rhythm in general, like I go through phases when I'm editing my books to listen to how the dialogue or how the prose is written. And I go, does that sound right? Does that sound how I want it to sound? And I follow the rhythm of my own stuff. And these things can't do that. They can only imitate what they think stuff should sound like, but they're not actually listening to it to be like, is this doing what I want it to do? How do I disrupt this long paragraph? And there is a purpose for doing long paragraphs versus short paragraphs, or doing hard returns or indents or changing things around, because it changes how something sounds. Same thing with punctuation marks. The way that you do something on a page, the layout, the line breaks, the punctuation, all of it is just ways of being a conductor of words on the page. It changes the pacing, the way that somebody reads, and that is something that a computer system cannot do because it doesn't understand like flow. It doesn't understand flow to that conceptual level. A recent study found ChatGPT largely fails to produce English language poems in the style of Walt Whitman, one of the more easily accessible poetry catalogs in the American canon. Whitman's style features fluid and unstructured verse, but ChatGPT often wrongly defaulted to the rigid norm of four-line stanzas. It continued to do this even when prompted not to. Oh, that's another thing, is that there is really no way to train a machine that relies on pattern recognition to understand creative writing, because you're going to have to give it a set of rules. And the only type of writing that really has stringent rules is academic writing. Because otherwise, if you're creatively writing, it doesn't follow the same rules. And I found this as well with the editing software or the spell checks and all of that, is when you run a spell check like Grammarly or like what's in Microsoft Word or any of them, it cannot account for creative choices. It's always going to say, hey, get rid of this because it's an adjective. Hey, clean it up for, APA or for Chicago style. Don't use these filler words. But humans talk in filler words. So it's cleaning it up for formal writing, when novel writing is not formal writing, it's creative writing. And so it's going to have different rules than formal writing. The issues are often exacerbated when ChatGPT is asked to produce poetic writing in languages other than English. The same researchers struggle to imitate common Polish styles of poetry, according to Goes. Earlier this year, researchers attempted to refine models to address shortcomings in AI-generated Japanese poems, such as haiku and waka. Rest of the world observed similar problems when we tested ChatGPT's ability to write poems in Tamil. The poems were incoherent at best. To date, there is evidence that major AI developers have been relying on easily scrapable databases to train their models in literary writings, including Project Gutenberg, an open source database with tens of thousands of literary works in the public domain. Some researchers also speculate that developers have been scraping Archive of Our Own platform, hosting over 5 million works of fan fiction. The copyrighted works of famous authors, including Stephen King, Zadie Smith, and George Saunders, were recently reported by The Atlantic to be part of the popular LLM's data set Book 3. Quote, it's not enough now that someone just speaks the language. It's not enough that someone is native, said Miceli, note rising standards for crowd-based data work. They have to have very broad vocabulary and in total command of the language. Julian Posada, an assistant professor at Yale and member of the law school's Information Society project, questions whether creatives will accept this work as sustainable sources of employment. But he told Rest of the World it may sidestep one of the main criticisms of AI coming from creative industries, copyright infringement. In recent months, workers in the creative industries, including manga illustrators in Japan, musical artists in India, and TV writers in the US, have been protesting AI developers' blasé approach to copyright law. Most recently, several class action lawsuits have been filed against OpenAI by prominent authors and playwrights, including Pulitzer Prize winner Michael Chabon. They claim that their copyrighted work was included in ChatGPT's training data without permission, since the tool can accurately summarize their work and imitate their style. Any text written in Scale AI or Appen, however, is likely to be owned in full by the training data company or its clients. Quote, we could be going to the point where you cannot fit copyrighted material into many models, Posada said, forecasting the change in the industry in this recent wave of copyright litigations is successful. This could be the solution that the tech sector is considering, just purchasing creative writing to feed into AI models. And maybe there are plenty of people that will just sell their content because they don't really care. But there are also many that do care, and they've already been consumed by these programs and these companies, and we're seeing the lawsuits at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. There is a recommendation here for the Saga of Miria by Brandon Vicensey. It says a superior and frankly far smaller Iron Age writer, and than say Eric July or Shadiversity. So I looked this book up and I don't see a digital copy. If you know where I can get a digital copy, please let me know, because I'm much more likely to purchase that than a paperback copy of an author that I don't know. I only get the paperbacks if I really like the books. But I will say that I have a bias at this point against anything that groups itself underneath a cause like Iron Age or Comicsgate because I have been insulted and belittled, and it doesn't seem like they're anything but a marketing group right now, a political marketing group specifically. And it makes me unsure about being connected to any of it or talking about any of it since I was addressed before by Iron Age people, and I have been insulted before by Iron Age and Comicsgate people, and I just don't want anything to do with it. I just want to explore creative writing. But if I don't know anything about this author or this book, if you know a digital copy, let me know, and I'm sharing the name just in case you guys would like to check it out as well. Hear your opinions on a book universe called The Hidden Legends of Megan Linsky and Alicia Rades. Personally enjoy it, but also I'd like to hear your opinion. I've added that to my group reading for books that are listed in this submit a topic request. So I don't know when I can get to those, especially since it's multiple. And I saw the first book is like 460 pages. We'll see. We'll see. I'll try to see what I can do on that. There's multiple series in it, and there's multiple series in it. That's a lot. But I've added it to the list to take a look at some point. This one says, I have a friend who has written a few books and I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. His name is Bill Bebb. His first effort was called Valley of Death Zombie Trailer Park. It's exactly what it sounds like. Zombies, meth heads, and assorted array of weirdos and reprobates that are thrown together by circumstances. The Kindle edition is free, so no monetary loss if you don't like it. Of course, zombies have been done to death at this point, so maybe Tiniest Invaders, you guessed it, sci-fi with microscopic aliens, may be more interesting, though I think the second book in this series is much better than the first. His highest rated book is Emperor of Bonnet Prison, which is one of the zombies' works set in a different world with different zombies than a Valley of Death, but probably has some of the best characters in it. Or none of the above. Whatever, you're probably busy reading all sorts of stuff. Had to throw it out there. I've already grabbed a copy of Zombie Trailer Park. I'll probably take a look at Emperor of Bayonne Prison first, since that's recommended because of the character work, and my preference for storytelling is character work. But again, I'm going to state the names, and I will try to link the author in the description down below if I remember to do so that anybody watching this video can also check out. So aside from me saying I'm adding it to my reading list to share these, I also want to just go over all of the book recommendations to share on the channel. So hopefully other people who might be interested as well and might be able to get to the books faster than I can also go check them out. Thoughts on Archblade Legend of the Defiler. It's on Kindle Unlimited, and if you don't have that, you can get a PDF. Don't worry about sending a PDF. I go and purchase the ebooks if somebody requests, because I want to pay artists for their work. I don't want to take anybody's free books if I don't want anybody to feel like they're owed something, and I always want to pay artists and authors for their work if I can. Even when I'm sent a book, like I've got a couple back there, when I read them, I also go and buy a copy. Just if it ends up in my P.O. box and then I end up reading it, which I do try to get to. I haven't. Like I said, I'm falling behind, but I do try to pay and read. So as soon as I get to Archblade Legend of the Defiler, you will see it on the channel. What if you did debates on writing? Personally, I don't see the point in doing debates on writing because I think that there is no winning for I do writing this way, or I do writing that way, or I do reading this way, or I do reading that way. I think there are a multitude of reasons why somebody might enjoy a book. And just because I don't enjoy it doesn't mean that other people won't enjoy it. Or just because I do enjoy something doesn't mean other people won't enjoy it. So one of the reasons why I constantly still cover one of the reasons I cover books on the channel that I still don't enjoy is because the ideas of those books still might appeal to somebody else, and or the content of the book I think is fun to discuss. Whether it's Silly Boy or it's going to be We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is I'm so excited to share We Need to Talk About Kevin, like for real. Or if it's Gretchen's book, or if it's just pretty much any of them. I like doing the longer reviews, or My Dark Vanessa, which I also really liked. I love sharing the ideas and getting into the discussion and getting into the character choices and getting into what was enjoyed or not enjoyed, or different ways in which we might take the content. And that's one of the reasons why I feel so unhappy, I guess, or or regretful about looking into anything from Comicsgate, because I feel like in trying to talk about those books, people are just looking for fights because of tribal wars that are unrelated to creativity or discussing creative content. Like, you get into stuff about X-Men or Marvel in general or Star Wars or 007 or Skyrim or Elder Ring or anything that people really, really like. And you just get to discuss stuff, whether you like it or not. You just get to discuss the lore, the character choices. You get to have fun with it. And I look forward to the day. I've looked forward to the day that people would meet Casey and Ralph and want to talk about Casey and Ralph. And I look forward to the day where I get to share the story of the aliens, or I get to share the story of the Westies, and people will want to talk about the elements in those stories, whether they like them or not. So when it comes to how to put a book together, or different methods of putting a book together, or different reasons to read a book, I don't think that there is any reason to debate, because people are going to enjoy different things, and that's fine. I think the most depressing comments that I get are ones that want to fight and call somebody stupid for just having a different opinion. I don't think anybody needs to feel bad about having their preferences. Like, I personally don't prefer erotica. I'm not trying to tell people that enjoy especially monster smut or dark smut or anything that they have to agree with me or there's anything wrong with them. But I should be able to discuss my ideas or my thoughts on any sort of matter. I should be able to discuss Cuckoo and the contents of that book without being personally attacked. And I'm not saying other than it's poorly written, and here are my reasons why it's poorly written. But other people can enjoy it for reasons that I didn't enjoy it for. And it's none of my business to beat somebody into the ground for liking something I don't like or disliking something that I like. There is no surrender. And debate usually implies there is a right and a wrong. And that also goes for writing. There is no reason to debate pantsing versus plotting versus a little bit of both on that scale. There is no reason to debate character writing over world building over plot driven stories, because people are going to enjoy different things. There's no reason to debate books that are character inserts or that are meant to be wish fulfillment versus books that are meant to explore certain ideas or themes. Everybody is going to enjoy something different, and there is no right or wrong answer to what you personally enjoy. So if anybody in the comments can think of any good reason for a writing debate, I think writing discussions are a lot of fun because you're all coming at it from a different angle. But I think the second that you turn it into something of trying to tell other people they are wrong, then it's not fun. And there's nothing you can do. I don't think anybody needs to feel bad about writing or reading the way that they write or read. Hi, and thank you for the interesting and entertaining videos. My question is about translated literature, especially translated indie books. For some context, I'm an aspiring writer from Finland, and while I can read and watch stuff in English with no problem, for a bit of ideological but mainly practical reasons, I prefer to write in Finnish. I'm trying to get my first novel finished this year, self-published, as soon as possible. After that, I'd love to get it translated, at least in English. I watch a lot of different book related stuff on YouTube and feel like there isn't that many, if any, videos about foreign indie authors. I hope this is not a silly question, but how do you think English speaking audiences feel about translated books? Do you have any advice for a foreign writer who is interested in someday debuting outside of their country, especially in the US/UK? Well, there's an entire industry of translated books that are in the traditional published industry. I think there's plenty of interest in translated books, and even two of the books on the current vote for list for the Loin Stream are Japanese authors, and one of them is a translation. I've read translated books. I don't have a problem with translated books. I don't think that there is any problem against it. I think it's just, generally speaking, and this is from my outsider's perspective of the industry, but it is very expensive to get a book translated from its original language to another language. So it has to have market popularity or an idea that it will sell in that marketplace in order to be translated. But it happens all the time. And I think that, that assumes that also stuff published in America is translated when it's sent somewhere else. I would love to have my stuff translated into other languages, but I know I don't have the funds to hire a translator that would allow it to be read in other countries at the moment. But there's plenty of interest in foreign books and foreign stories. It's just freaking expensive to translate if you're not bilingual. So this topic was in this article discusses the value of art, why it matters, and how modern sensibilities are reducing its empty abstraction. It's thought-provoking. Thought you'd be interested. So let's check it out. It's called Sick and Sick of It All from offguardian.org, and it is by Edward Curtin. Sometimes it takes our bodies to return us to our soul, and our little pains to remind us of the indescribable pain of the savage killing and dismemberment of innocent children and adults in Gaza and many other places by U.S. weapons produced in clean factories by people just doing their jobs and collecting their pay at defense contractors, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Pfizer, etc. Abstraction is the name of the game as human bodies are torn to pieces over there and the obscene profits are transferred at computer terminals day and night. Living in a technological world of the internet divorces us from real life as it passes into inert, abstract, and dead screen existence. It should not be surprising that people grow sick and tired of steamy streams of news that fill their days and nights. So much of the news is grotesque. Propaganda abounds, stories twisted right and left to tie minds into knots. After a while, as Macbeth tells us, life seems like a walking shadow, a poor prayer that struts and frets its hours upon the stages, and then it's heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Being sickened out of it for a while allows one a different perspective on the world. This is especially true for those of us who often write about politics and propaganda. A recent illness has forced me to step away from my usual routine following political events closely. Fleeting headlines have been all but I've noticed for the past 2 weeks. While lying around waiting for an illness to leave, I would drift in and out of reverie and memories that would afloat to semi-consciousness. Feeling miserable prevented any focus or logical thinking, but not, I emphasized, thinking in a deeper physical sense. But it also gave me a reprieve from noting the repetitive and atomized nature of internet postings, as if one needs to be hammered over and over again and again to understand the world whose realities are much simpler than the endless scribblers and politicians are willing to admit. You know, I noticed this as well specifically. You probably wouldn't have guessed it, but I did have a fairly politically charged blog in 2016, 2017, 2018 when I was closer involved with universities because I was still in graduate school in 2016 and still involved with like AWP and stuff in 2017, 2018. And I was looking at stuff much more politically, watching more political shows online and everything. And then a couple of years ago, I was just like, this is such a waste of time. I would rather be writing stories, and I don't fit in anywhere. These people don't like me because I don't have their values enough. These people don't like me because I don't have their values enough. All of these people seem fake and like they're not trying to make friends. They're not trying to get to know you. It's all a control apparatus of some kind, and I don't believe in any of them. I've been mistreated everywhere, so I'm going to focus on creativity and telling my stories and telling the best thing that I can, and then I'll see what I can do from there. And dissociating from those things and then just looking at books, not from a political angle, but from I'm analyzing the stories the best I can from my perspective and bringing those to discuss the stories to the best of my abilities to then get more perspective on it has helped in expanding my understanding in general. And I'm never done learning. I think this is also one of the reasons why I prefer to be called an idiot at the start of my videos. It's another way to say that I'm a fool. I'm entering information. I'm exploring ideas, and I'm going to look stupid because I'm not going to get everything the first time, or I'm going to have a weird interpretation of something, or I'm going to say something wrong. And I can only get closer to understanding other people by saying something that might prompt somebody to say something else. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to agree with you if I understand your perspective, but I can better recognize or understand different approaches if I understand the different thought patterns of other people. And that's also something that kind of gets lost in the political ideology. It's like you have to, if you try to understand someone, then you have to accept everything that they're doing. You have to condone it. And if you say that you want to understand someone's perspective, and then you still disagree with it, then that means that you're a hypocrite and you're not really interested in other perspectives. No, I can understand where you're coming from and still say that I disagree, but I can also say, okay, I understand why you're making the decisions you're making, and I don't think you're evil. Or I do think you're evil if you're trying to show pornography to children. You know who you are. there are a lot more people that are casually into showing children porn and not afraid to say it than I am comfortable existing. Jonathan Crary, in the scathing critique of the digital world and Scorched Earth, puts it thus: for the elites, the priority remains keep people enclosed within the augmented unrealities of the internet complex, where experience is fragmented into kaleidoscope of fleeting claims of importance of never-ending admonitions on how to conduct our lives, manage our bodies, what to buy, and who to admire or fear, which I think that's also true. During my sickness, I did manage to read a few brief pieces, an essay, a short story, and a poem. Serendipitously, each confirmed the trend of my thinking over recent years, as well as what my bodily discomfort was teaching me. I also think that I've seen this in my comment section as well, where it's like people are looking for what to mark you off with. It doesn't matter where they're coming from, is they're looking for you to say something in a specific way or to look a certain way so they can go, okay, I know that you are my enemy, so now I can just bitch slap you into compliance. And instead of trying to understand or get to know the person and see maybe where there's nuance, maybe where you can't assume what the person thinks in all of these other ways, it's constantly trying to find a way to dismiss somebody, especially if they aren't walking a very thin line that is the only way to go. It is less about curious truth seeking or curious perspective seeking, and more about I need you to tell me what you think so that I can bully you or belittle you or mistreat you because you've proven that you don't follow the same things that I do to a T. And I've also seen in recent years so many people who are afraid of being kicked out of anything and everything because they've already experienced that homelessness, or their friends turn on them for some obscure reason that they don't even explain. They just go, you know what? I don't like the way that you said that. You think that you can pair waddling and fat together? Excuse me, that's a problem. So I'm throwing you out on your ass. The first was an essay by the art critic John Berger about the abstract expressionist avant-garde painter Jackson Pollock, titled A Kind of Sharing. It struck me as very true. Pollock came to prominence in the late 1940s and the early 1950s. He was described as an action painter who poured paint on large canvases to create abstract designs that were lauded by the New York art world. Some have sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. The description of Pollock as an untalented pourer, Berger says, is false, for Pollock was a very precise master of his art who was aware of how he was putting paint on canvas and of the effect of his abstractions. His work made no reference to the outside world, since such painting at the time was considered illustrative. Berger says that Pollock's paintings were violent in that, quote, the body, the flesh had been rejected, and they were the consequence of the rejection. He argues that Pollock, who died in a drunken car crash in East Hampton, Long Island, on August 11th, 1956, was committing art suicide with his abstract paintings because he had rejected the ancient assumption of painting that the visible contained hidden secrets, that behind appearances there were presences. For Pollock, there was nothing beyond the surface of his canvas. This was because he was painting the nothingness that he felt and wished to convey, which, again, goes to what I always talk about with your art form, what you choose to put on, like the choices that you make for the emotions, for the experiences. Artwork, whether it's writing, visual, music, structures, any of it, is a communication of emotion or experience. And in like the cases, if you look at statues, usually it's some sort of magnificence, if it's a political leader of some kind, or it's some sort of pain, or it's some sort of terror, because we've seen those before. Or we got the Mothman statue, and again, something of awe, something of honor. There is an emotional expression that is being passed through the art. Whether you recognize it or not, that is why your choices matter. You're trying to express something specific, and you're making the deliberate choices that do that very thing. And then you got people that don't understand this about art, and then they just see the splatters, or they see the bad techniques, what looks like bad techniques. They see the surface level of things, and they don't understand what is actually happening with the art they are looking at. Or they are used to art like product, and that's confused them that there is no point in art because they're looking at product. a nihilism that was both personal and abroad in society. Pollock's story is a sad one, for he was praised and used by forces far more powerful than he. Nelson Rockefeller, who was president of the Museum of Modern Art that his mother had co-founded, called Pollock's work free enterprise painting, and the CIA, through its Congress for Cultural Freedom, secretly promoted it as a Cold War weapon against the Soviet Union socialist realism art, even as right-wing congressmen ripped Pollock as a perverse artist. So, in the name of openness, the CIA secretly promoted Pollock's avant-gardism as a real American art in a campaign of propaganda, while the right wing bashed him as a perverted leftist. This sick double game became the template for future mind control operations that are widespread today. As was his habit, Berger brilliantly places Pollock's work within social and political histories, a description of a time very similar to today when the word freedom was bandied about. Then it was the freedom of the voice American extolling the Cold War tale of the freedom of the free world, freedom of artists to be free of rhetoric, history, and the past, and to jettison the tyranny of the object, freedom of the market amidst the strident yet coherent sense of loss. He writes, Jackson Pollock was driven by despair, which was partially his and partially that of the time that nourished him, to refuse this act of faith that painting reveals the presence behind an appearance, to insist with all of his brilliance as a painter that there was nothing behind, that there was only that which was done to the canvas on the side facing us. This simple, terrible reversal, born of an individualism that was frantic, constituted the suicide. This short essay by Berger about Pollock's denial of the human body struck me as my own body was temporarily failing me. It seemed to contain lessons for the augmented realities of the internet and the new Cold War being waged for the control of our minds and hearts today, inducements to get lost in abstractions. Then, one day, I picked up another book from the shelf to try to distract myself from my physical misery. It was the collection of stories by John Fowler. I read the opening novella, The Ebony Tower, haltingly over days. It was brilliant and eerily led me to a place similar to that of Berger's thoughts about Pollock. Fowler explores art in the body against a dreamy background of a manor house in a French countryside. As I read it lying on the couch, I fell in and out of oniric reveries in sleep, induced by my body's revolt against my mind. Trying to distract myself from my aches and pains, I found myself ambushed by writing about corporality. Both Berger and Fowler sensed the same thing, that modernity was conspiring to deny the body's reality in favor of visual abstractions, that in doing so, our essential humanity was being lost and the slaughters of innocent people were becoming abstractions. Then the internet came along to first offer a hope, only to become an illusion of freedom increasingly controlled by the media in the service of the deep state forces. Soon, the only way to write and distribute the truth will be retro, on paper and exchanged hand to hand. This, no doubt, sounds outlandish to those who have swallowed the digital mind games, but they will be surprised once they fully wake up. I want to disagree with this here because it pretends that there wasn't manipulation in print before, that there weren't gatekeepers in control of the print before. And so while there are censors and there is manipulation that happens online, there has always been censors and manipulations that happen in print as well. And what I think is a bigger issue with exchanging information is that people don't want to seek out information or perspectives that disagree with what they think is right or what they feel. And so when they experience something that is counter to what they're comfortable with or counter to what they believe, the immediate thing is to reject it, to find a way to completely dismiss the entirety of that person and to not put up with it at all. When you can have somebody who has a differing perspective that you don't even think is tasteful, and they still have reasonable perspective in general because you still have to live alongside them. I was talking about this with someone the other day where it's like you generally surround yourself with people who often agree with you or are willing to agree with you, even if they don't agree with you, they don't say their disagreements. And it's because a lot of people get uncomfortable when they're met with disagreement. And then they go, well, I don't want anything to do with you because we disagree on this thing. And then you end up with a group of people who openly agree with you. And then you think that your opinion is actually the majority opinion because you've surrounded yourself with people who agree with you. And then you get out of your bubble and you see that there are opinions, and your opinion might actually be the minority in the bigger pool of things. Not always, but it is there. But people don't seek out content or individuals that openly disagree with them. And often there is the marking of people that disagree with you as some sort of evil, as some sort of controller. And that is the bigger manipulation thing, is people don't want to be disagreed with, don't want to be uncomfortable. And so then they seek out things that'll confirm their bias, and then they end up in this place that isn't the truth. And you can have that online or offline. I think you can only get it from print is just another way to manipulate, because now you're going to have this guy over here who is just printing out what he would put on Twitter anyway. Fowler's story is about what we get with the internet is more freedom and more ability to get around the censors and even often the monetary constraints or the global constraints. Not always, because there's still controllers, but no more controlly than if you're just printing and you can't get anything out of your country anyway. Fowler's story is about David, an art historian who goes to visit a famous cranky old painter named Henry Beasley. The younger man is writing about the older and thinks that it would be interesting to meet him, even though he thinks it isn't necessary to write the article he has already composed in his mind. The art historian, like many of his ilk, live in his mind an academic abstraction. He is, in a sense, pure mind. He is, in a sense, pure mind in many ways, to replicate the T.S. Eliot's neurotic J. Alfred Purefrock. The old painter lives in a physical world where sex and the body and nature enclose his world, where paint is used to illuminate the physical reality of life and its sensuous, not abstraction, where physical life and death infuse his work, including political realities. I want to go back to something I just said that has to do with putting yourself in an echo chamber too. People don't really understand why I read as vastly as I do in genres and with books that I may not necessarily be interested in, other than for the fact that it gives me a different perspective than one that I already agree with or like. So I read stuff that I like regularly, not as much as I would like, but you know, I've got My Dark Vanessa was great, and then We Need to Talk About Kevin has been great, and I'm looking forward to finishing that and completing my thoughts and sharing it. But then you've got stuff like Cuckoo. Then you've got stuff like Silly Boy. Then you've got stuff like Amygdala. And while they aren't my flavor of thing, they still give me an idea, a perspective that I wouldn't get otherwise. And so I read them and I discuss them to get that other view. Or if you look at some of the comics with Comicsgate, like Rippaverse, or what will eventually be Cyberfrog, you've got people that come in from these other places, or with Shadow of the Conqueror. They assume that you read things because you're trying to take somebody down, or you're doing it, their favorite word is in bad faith. So what is your preference? That people who don't agree with you necessarily, or may not share your perspective, never touch your work, to never get to know what it is you're doing or what you believe or how you craft artwork? It's always to just get in this little silicone that nobody outside of who your target audience, who already agree with you, would see? Because I think that's actually more limiting. And it shows this perspective that people desire to be in line with everybody else instead of expanding themselves to get a better idea of things, even if they end up not liking it. And then it often turns into insult. Why would you read this? Well, because I was interested in seeing what this person would do. And in other cases, well, that one won an award. Why would I not read it? To see what won an award. Obviously, not new to William Butler Yeats's discovery, as expressed in the conclusion of his poem, The Circus Animal's Desertion. Those masterful images, because complete, grew in pure mind, but out of what began. A mound of refuse, or the sweepings of a street, old kettles, old bottles, or a broken can. Old iron, old bones, old rags. That revolting slut who keeps the till. Now that's my ladder. Now that my ladder's gone. Now that my ladder's gone, I must lie down where all of the ladders start, in the foul rag and bone shop of the heart. The old man fiercely defends the old rag and bone shop of the heart against all abstractions and academic bullshit, where all of the young man's métier. He accuses the young critic of being afraid of the human body, when the critic responds, perhaps more interesting in the mind than the genitals, that caustic and funny painter says, God help your bloody wife then. He accuses the younger man of being in the game of destruction and castration, of supporting abstraction to the expense of flesh and blood life. Quote, there are worse destroyers around than non-representant art, the critic says in his defense, to which the painter roars, you better tell that to Hiroshima, or to someone who's been napalmed. Back and forth they go as nubile art student who is there to help the elderly artist acts as a sort of interlocutor. Her presence adds a sexual fission throughout the story, a temptation to the milquetoast critic's life of sad complacency. The wild man's rants he calls Jackson Pollock, Jackson Bullock, are continually paraphrased by the girl. She says, quote, "Art is a form of speech. Speech must be based on human needs, not abstract theories of grammar, or anything but spoken word. The real word, ideas, are inherently dangerous because they deny human facts. The only answer to fascism is a human fact." The old painter's uncensored tongue brought tears of laughter to my eyes and a bit of relief to my ache and pains. I was primarily taken aback by the weirdness of haphazardly reading a second piece that coincided with my deepest thoughts that had been intensified by my body's revolt. The narrator's words stuck with me as especially true for our current situation. Quote, "What the old man still had was an umbilical cord to the past. A step back, he stood by Puccinello's side, in spirit anyway. While David was encapsulated in a book knowledge, art as social institution, science subject matters for grants and committee discussions, that was the real kernel of his wildness. David and his generation, and all of those to come, could only look back through the bars like caged animals born in captivity at the old green freedom. That described exactly the experience of those last 2 days. The laboratory monkey allowed to glimpse his lost true self. The internet life has made caged monkeys of us all. We seem to think that we are seeing the real world through connectivity bars, but these cells that enclose us are controlled by our zookeepers, and they are not our friends. Their control of our cages keeps increasing. We just fail to see the multiplying bars. They have created a world of illusions and abstractions, serving the interests of global capitalism. Insurging voices still come through, but less and less as the elites compound their control. As internet access has expanded, the world's suffering has increased and economic inequality heightened. That is an unacknowledged fact, and facts count. Toward the end of 2 weeks' stay in the land of sickness, I read this poem by Palestinian poet Rafat Al-Lirer, who was killed in Gaza by an IDF airstrike on December 6, 2023, along with his brother, nephew, sister, and 3 of her children. My sickness turned to rage. So what I want to point out here is he complains about created a world of illusions and abstractions, which is true. I do think that there's a lot of fake content out there, and there's a lot of manipulation, and there's a lot of trying to guide you to think and believe or be a certain way. But also, down here, Palestinian poet that was killed last year, and a poem that this person liked and they somehow found because of the global connectivity. And it may not be from the internet, it may be because it was published, but maybe they found it because it was on a website. And so there are pros and cons, as there are always pros and cons that come specifically with any choice, but with freedom especially. Like if I look at the way that publishing industry is right now, it is an absolute mess, mind you. But the indie publishing industry is also a mess because you have complete openness to put whatever you want out there. You've got people that are doing the 20 to 50K and flooding the market. Generative AI flooding the market. People taking their first drafts, flooding the actual market. 15-year-olds pretending to be 18-year-olds, putting their fan fiction onto Amazon, flooding the market. And because you have the freedom to not be controlled by the gatekeepers of the industry, which say, hey, we're only publishing romantasy that is super spicy, that is called YA, even though it's not really for teens, but it is for teen weaky face. Because we're allowed to get around those people, we also have the compromise that we deal with these other issues. And the only thing that you can say against that is, well, if we didn't have the freedom to be destroyed by content, then you also wouldn't have the freedom to say and do whatever you want to get that out there. And that can go for any website, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Twitter, whether it's wherever. You have the best choice, the best options now to have your voice heard, to be heard without censors than you did at any point in history. That doesn't mean that there are not censors out there, that there are not people trying to control and manipulate, and especially the grifters in every area where they might see that there is anger that they can capitalize on. But you also have the best chance to find authenticity, to find something that is not being just pushed by the corporations, because without the freedom, all you have is what the corporations choose to give you. So I understand where this comes from, but also I think that we're in a more hopeful time. The only thing is that you start to see a lot of people that may not all be there, or you actually have more exposure to people that are bad people. And then it makes you think that there are more of them than there are. If I look at some of my community tab questions, right? So we've got one that was, is empathy real? And then there was another one that says, is there a benefit to kindness? Even though there were like over 600 responses to that, and 92% of them said, yes, there is a benefit to kindness. And many of you guys put answers in the question, in the comment section that explained further. There was still 4% that said there was no benefit, and 4% that said it's a manipulation tool. And that 8% can change the perspective of the lives of everyone that they touch into thinking it is so much different than that 92%. Do you see what I mean? So, and I hope you guys are enjoying the community tab questions like I am. They aren't to prove anything is right or anything is wrong. It's just more to show that there are different perspectives that we might not ever run into, or we might never acknowledge, because we think that the way that we see the world or the choices that we make are so obvious that clearly nobody would believe otherwise. Nobody would do otherwise, right? And just 1% is enough to be a bitch slap in the face to everything that you believe, because then that still means that there are 16 people out there. It's more than that. But, you know, last time I checked, when it was like 4% of 500, there are still 16 people out there in 500 that don't believe there's a benefit to kindness. And what does that mean if you run into that person in the group of 500? So I don't think that the freedom of the internet makes anything worse. I think that it makes it better. But I do think that there has been a devaluation, and this is going to go with the video I'm going to do next week that is going to be about mass consumerism, so we can talk about like the values being lost, and where are people putting the values when all they want to do is consume? Because I think a lot of stuff is right now coming down to just having as much as possible, but not deriving anything from it. And I think that's something worth discussing. I mean, obviously it's been discussed by smarter people than me, but I want to bring it here to kind of look at it, especially with AI being the consumption piece that it is. It's just make as much content as possible. For what benefit? Think about it. With that said, let me know your thoughts on any of the subjects in the comments down below. If you have anything that you want me to cover, submit it to the topic request, and I will try to reasonably get to the topic request. So we're making it through right now. With that said, have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?